Bounty hunting is a complicated profession. Don't you agree?
The CINIKRADIO podcast.
Hi, I'm Chad L. Coleman, Tyrese from The Walking Dead, and Cuddy from The Wire, and you are listening to the Cinik Radio podcast. Here your host, Cinik.
Hey, the facts are Spider-Man belongs in the MCU. Sony was delusional thinking they didn't need Marvel, and now he's back. And we, the fans, are 100% proudly responsible for that.
Igrihe.
As long as DC wants to make dark and gritty movies, they're going to lag behind Marvel in every category.
And Ryan.
Batman vs. Superman is objectively better than Infinity War.
IG, did we just forget Kim?
You guys completely suck.
This is the greatest show of all time.
This is episode 145 of the Cinik Radio podcast, and I'm your host, Cinik. And joining me, as always, three Rebel pilots who always have their S-foils in locked attack position, Igrihe, Ryan, and Kim. And on this week's show, we're breaking down the heart-wrenching Chapter 16, and also the Season 2 finale of The Mandalorian entitled The Rescue. We talk a little bit about our predictions for Season 3, all that and more, and it starts now. The episode opens with Slave One chasing a Lambda shuttle. IG, if there ever was a ship you didn't want pursuing you in the Star Wars universe, on one end you have the Millennial Falcon with its sweet list lazily left move KG-like maneuvers, but in the reverse, if you're to look in your rearview mirror, is there a ship you want behind you less than Slave One?
Well, the only thing it's missing is like lights and sirens and stuff to make you have a heart attack as you're driving down the road. It's scary because it's fast. It's got a lot of firepower and apparently a lot of different kinds of firepower. A pretty cool chase scene, but we'd seen some of that before, like in episode 2 when Obi-Wan's chasing Jango in the same ship. He's doing some pretty snaky maneuvers there too. So like I like seeing that versus the lazy list to the left. It's a lot of fun, and you know, when you have space and you're working in 3 dimensions, you know, I kind of wonder sometimes why they don't like hanging up all of a sudden rather than kind of moving back and forth to the left. But it was still really cool to watch.
Our heroes chase down the ship and stop it mid-flight with an ion cannon. They find their target inside. Dr. Pershing is probably the worst Imperial of all time. Kara gets taunted by one of the crew members about the destruction of Alderaan. Kim, did you get a very Jules Winfield from Pulp Fiction-like vibe as the back and forth progressed? You could see it in her eyes, like she said, "Say Alderaan one more time. I double dare you, motherfucker."
Right. It was a great little moment, and it kind of leads you into what's going to kind of transpire throughout the rest of the episode. For me, it kind of set the tone. It was one of those moments where I kind of had like one of those cheese stick eating grins on my face because I was like, okay, all right, they mean business here, right? Things are going to get serious, and I don't know to what extent, but you know, the last few episodes have been relatively calm. That whole little transition right there just kind of, to me, made it, like I said, set that tone for what's going to take place throughout the rest of the episode. And it kind of, I was just happy. Like I was ready. I was into it. I was tied in. I was like, this is that moment.
There is no less mess around a person in the Star Wars universe than Cara Dune. I mean, you say the wrong thing to her, she's just going to blast you straight in the face. And you've got to respect that part of her game. Ryan, on one end, we have the dearly departed smack-talking crew member. And then we have, on the other end, Dr. Pershing, who rolls over and gives up everything to his would-be kidnappers. Do you think he's a coward or not as much of an Imperial as his insignia may lead you to believe?
I think they established from season 1 that I think it's more the latter. I think he is a bit, you know, he's definitely not like a soldier. And, you know, it seems like he cared even before more about the child than the other Imperials seemed to. Like, he seemed to care for his well-being. So I think in this situation, it's like, look, he's caught. He doesn't, you know, he's not under the thumb of the Empire. And for what it's worth, he probably, you know, is fairly weak and would have given up. But I do think he actually genuinely cared for the well-being of Grogu and probably knew that he was better off in the hands of, you know, Mando than in the hands of Moff Gideon. And so that was his opportunity to do it. So I actually think it's a little bit more the latter.
IG, our predictions of a team up comes together pretty quickly as Djarin and company fly to meet with Bo-Katan and company. They try to recruit them for this assault and the rescue. Reeves and Fett get into a bit of a tussle, and it looks like Boba kind of lost that on points. As cool of a character as Sasha Banks plays, did this decision to have her kind of go over the bounty hunter make any sense?
Not really, but, it's kind of fun to see, a couple of badasses go at it together. It's kind of fun. And, there is some things. Boba Fett's a little bit old. He's been wandering around a desert for a few years and everything. So maybe he's not quite on his game. The armor helps, but, you still got to have some skill behind it. But he didn't lose completely. It wasn't completely one-sided. But the exchange even beforehand was pretty great. And he's talking about his armor was given to him from his father. Well, don't you mean your donor? I loved that whole thing, because she's right and she's not, because he had Boba made unchanged, no alteration in the cloning process, a direct clone of Jango Fett. So yes and no about father and everything, but yeah, why they needed to have a fight in a bar or something. And, what is it about Star Wars bars that you can shoot people, fight and everything else, and nobody ever kicks you out or tells you not to come in here anymore?
Just as long as you're not a droid. They have distinct prejudice against them, but everything else is cool. Set people on fire, just gun down Rhodians in cold blood, but nobody seems to care. And maybe cut a guy's arm off every once in a while. What did you think of the tussle, Ryan? I mean, was it worth the shine that they took off of Fett so Sasha Banks could get her finishing move in?
I was mixed on it. I think, definitely watching it. It's 2 episodes ago, we had a situation where he looked, that was the most badass we've ever seen Boba Fett look. So it bugged me immediately to kind of see him get bested. But at the same time, I thought about it and he's holding back. He doesn't want to kill her, and he's older. And he dispatched stormtroopers, but it's made clear in this series that stormtroopers are just terrible. I'd take C-3PO over these stormtroopers as far as in a battle. Yeah, he looked badass against them, but it was he's holding back. They're not going to kill each other. It was kind of cool to watch 2 Mandalorians go at it. Again, both holding back. Neither one is really going for the kill. So I was okay with it after initially thinking, why do they let him get bested by Sasha Banks?
Hey, and where was the third member, by the way? Did they send him out for tacos or something?
Yeah, he was on a coffee run.
And he comes back and he's like, oh, seriously, guys, y'all left? Where did y'all go? Then they just left him there.
Guys just standing there disbelieving as they pull away with the Starbucks in his hands. I'm never going for coffee again. Kim, you brought up last week, you felt like the show sometimes is a little journey heavy and destination light. And this week was a little more of the same. I mean, we're assaulting the number 3 or 4 highest ranking Imperial ship as far as the commander. Should the conflict been settled less than 10 minutes?
I don't know. For some odd reason, this episode had a completely different feel for it. And I don't know if it's because it didn't take very far into the episode in order for some action to actually take place. Typically when the episodes, begin, you're waiting a good, 20, 30 minutes before you get into a fight scene or, somebody's trying to take Grogu. So it's this time around, it kind of felt a little bit different to me. Maybe there was, I don't know, a healthy dosing of multiple acts taking place in a short period of time. So, tensions were high pretty much throughout the episode. And there were a couple of situations throughout this particular one where I was very uncomfortable. And it was the first time I'd kind of felt that way throughout this show, at least this season.
Ryan, growing up, we had Princess Leia and Princess Leia. The Mandalorian has put an emphasis on the strong female action hero. Do you think this trend will continue going forward? And did it feel, at least in the context of this episode, a lot less forced than the all-female Avengers scene in Endgame?
Yeah, it's funny how I thought that. I think everybody thought that watching this. So first off, they were missing Ahsoka, which is if you wanted to go all in, the most kind of badass female character that we've had on this, arguably. And that was maybe my only critique is why didn't he go for Ahsoka? There was somebody who clearly could have taken those, the Dark Troopers, but that's neither here nor there. There was some point while it's going on that I kind of thought, oh, wow, it's Mando's the one guy, Boba Fett, jetted, and he's got 4 women. And at no point, it's that thought occurred very much kind of in passing. It wasn't like in Endgame when it was oh God, they're really shoving this down our throats. It was just oh cool, and there was no point that it didn't feel forced. It didn't feel ham-handed. It didn't feel or ham-fisted. It didn't feel like they were trying to say girl power. They just had the characters, and part of it is that it was really earned. It's that they're believable. That we believe they're all badass. We believe that they're capable of holding their own against Imperials or against anybody for that matter. That in many situations situations they've all held their own against Mando, or at a minimum have gotten him out of trouble. It was earned. It worked really well, and at no point did I ever feel like they're really trying to go that route, which I really appreciated and thought just worked brilliantly.
I have a little bit of a difference of opinion on that one, because I'm very much sick and tired of the power female moment always being when they line up in a single row and then they're like, yes, let's go, and I'm tired of seeing that. It was like that in Endgame. I felt like it was that here, and I go, oh, it's that moment of the show. And as a female watching it, I was like, why can't they just give each female character or whatnot their own moment to kind of shine in this particular episode, perhaps in a fight scene or, with a catchy tagline or something like that? Why do they always have to just kind of knock it out with just, all right, we're going to put them all in a row and then they're all going to give each other the look, and then they're going to walk off victoriously. Like, I'm so annoyed with that kind of crap.
Well, I see both sides of it in the way that I see that it wasn't over the top like Endgame, but it was still there. Like, every single member of the strike team didn't need to be female. They didn't need to kind of all stroll in a line or give that look. They dialed back. It was a lot more subtle than it was in Endgame, but I think there's still remnants of that there. Kim, tapping into your wheelhouse a little bit. I mean, being a very talented artist, what is your opinion of the overall design of the Dark Troopers? And if there is anything that you don't like, what would you change about them?
Actually, I thought they were quite good. And this was one of those moments where I was a little bit uncomfortable, like when they, are punching their way through that door and they're, making that grand entrance. And I'm like, oh crap, these guys are tough, right? They're super strong. I don't know if I'm jumping too far forward here, but like when they're tossing Mandalorian around like he's a rag doll, that made me incredibly uncomfortable, because I'm like, well, crap, we haven't really encountered anything, in my opinion, yet that was this intimidating or this strong and perhaps this powerful, and it not be Jedi related. It had RoboCop vibes, with the whole marching out, the red eyes or whatever. I understand why they did it, but maybe I would have changed that up just slightly, maybe something more Terminator-like. But, I think it was pretty cool, and I really enjoyed those scenes.
Well, Kim brings up a good point, IG. The Dark Trooper versus Djarin was a bit of a slobber knocker with him pulling out all the stops. But them being the ultimate stormtrooper, do you think they were right where they needed to be, or do you think they were slightly overpowered?
Well, considering what they were going for and what they were making there, and the history of where the Dark Troopers shown up, and specifically the Phase 3 Dark Troopers, which these are, I think they're right where they needed to be. And like, they're not undefeatable, but they're not stormtroopers. They're like very well programmed, very strong, very well put together droids. Taking out the human aspect, you don't have the mistakes that humans make when they panic or have things go wrong. They just are killing machines. So like Kim said, very Terminator-like, except, very droid-looking. So I was very impressed with where they sat, where they came up, and, the callback to a 20-plus-year-old video game.
Ryan, being 5 steps ahead of everybody, do you think Moff Gideon's fight with Djarin was one that he thought he could actually win? Or do you think it was more of a ploy to cause a divide amongst the invading force once he was beaten?
I would say, again, more the latter in this case. He had to know that he couldn't go one-on-one with Din Djarin. He might have thought in that moment he has Darksaber. Maybe he had a chance there. Once I think he's going Darksaber against the Beskar spear, he probably figured that was it. But yeah, he could, he had 2 things in his back pocket. One is he could try to sow the discontent between them. He is steps ahead of everyone, or generally is. But 2, he had the Dark Troopers in his back pocket. And so, I think there was those 2 things going for him. So it was like, okay, I'm going to try, but I think he had to figure he was going to lose. The only thing is he did seem kind of genuinely surprised that he saved his life. So I don't know if he kind of had that in the back of his mind that maybe they would want him alive and that Mando would keep him alive, or, if he just got lucky. But yeah, I do think he figured at that point he still had the Dark Troopers whom they thought they'd kind of dumped out, but were still kind of on their way back to save the day for him.
So I just want to bring up, before we move on from this, like, what kind of crazy person puts like an easily accessible open window or something where you keep your most expensive thing on a ship that has like rooms inside the ship. Like, no, let's put a lever here outside the room that I can just dump all that stuff back out into space. Like, see you later, guys. Nice knowing you. Does anybody see that was just too easy? Like, I thought, like, okay, you got to fight one Dark Trooper, you stab him with your spear, and then you go over and pull a switch, and all the rest of them go out the window. It seemed a little odd to me.
I didn't believe for a second that they were gone, though. I knew they were coming back. Without a doubt, I knew they were coming. I mean, if it was humans, that would be one thing. But you know that they have repulsors. You knew they were going to fly right back to the ship at some point. Logically, it didn't make much sense. Kim, I just beat this mastermind for you. And oh, by the way, here's the most powerful weapon in the galaxy. You can take it, go reclaim your planet, but you don't want it because what would people say? Were you like I was, just shaking your head and yelling at Bo-Katan, just take the stupid saber? Do we really need to do this right now? There's bigger problems in the galaxy than your honor or how you got the weapon.
Never, ever, ever, ever trust anything. Like, you have a moment, you take it, right? If it's being presented to you, you freaking go for it. The entire exchange was just a little off-putting to me. I don't know if this was like moment number 2 where I was watching it and just kind of going, oh, for the love of God, like go for it, take it, run with it. And I don't know, do some fucking damage or something, but for the love of God.
It's always that moral code that gets you in the end, right?
My only issue more was that it seems like a weird plot hole because they've been able to pass in the Rebels. Sabine just handed it to her. So, that you had a similar scenario where it was like, oh yeah, take it, no problem. So I think that has to be explained. Why, is it just that because it was verbalized in front of other Mandalorians that she couldn't just, I don't know, like that part that was the only part that bothered me, but I kind of like it as a bit of a narrative device because it means that theoretically Din Djarin is the leader of the Mandalorians, potentially a ruler of Mandalore. It creates conflict with him and Bo-Katan and maybe gives us some stuff to work with towards season 3. So actually it worked. My only issue is, but then how do you get past what happened in Rebels?
That's what I was looking at, too, because Sabine just handed it to her in front of hundreds of Mandalorians and Rebels. It was like, here, you take it. And that was okay, but there's one other Mandalorian, just one in there. And it's like, nope, I can't touch it. No, go away. I'm like, okay, like you could just send her off on a mission to like the Outer Rim and like you go stay on Tatooine for a while. You go over there. And don't come back until you have 12 bantha tusks or something. Give her some weird thing that maybe can't be done. If it's in front of hundreds, cool. If it's in front of one, not okay.
Yeah.
Listen, the WWF Hardcore title used to change hands like 10 times a night on Raw. We could pass the saber along. The Djarin could just take the fall. She get the 3 count and go reclaim Mandalore and everything is good. IG, the Dark Troopers absolutely have the heroes surrounded. As Gideon proudly announces, he will be the only person left alive along with the child. As a big emotional diehard geek like I am, tell me your thoughts when you saw that X-Wing slowly float into frame, land, and that black-clothed figure start slowly walking towards the enemies.
Well, first the X-Wing showed up, and I'm like, is this like the beginning of a bunch of people showing up because Cara Dune's there, and maybe she sent some kind of signal to the Rebel fleet? Moments later, I'm like, nope, it's just one. Why are they landing? Who would come with one X-Wing? Oh shit, who's got one X-Wing all of their own? The gears started turning real slowly, and because, we hadn't had any real decent look at Luke in 20 plus years at this point, when it clicked on me that we've got just after Return of the Jedi Luke, who's looking to build a new Jedi Order at this point and everything. Grogu was just putting out a beacon and stuff, so it's got to be Luke. It's got to be Luke. And when he got out, they weren't super clear. They weren't leading to it initially because they were showing it through the monitors in the bridge, right? Which, for some reason, with all their advanced technology, are still black and white and grainy. But you see a dude kind of in a cloak, running around with a lightsaber, chopping things up, making short work of everything he comes across. And then we get live action right there, and you see green. And it's like, nope, now we know it's Luke. But they still don't show his face.
I actually loved it. I thought it was what was needed because it's bringing everything together. All these TV shows and some of the novels and the movies and all the trilogies, it's bringing it all together. And I loved it. I thought it was exactly what we needed. And Ryan, as we experienced the full power of the light side of the Force, as he made these Supreme droids look like Roger Rogers from the prequels, was it reminiscent of Darth Vader's Path of Destruction in Rogue One?
It's funny. It's like Star Wars loves the hallway scenes, right? Like you had Darth Vader in Rogue One with that amazing Star Wars scene. I don't know if you watched the last season of Clone Wars had an amazing hallway scene with Darth Maul, which was incredible, as good as if not better than the hallway scene with Vader. And then you have this, which like takes that up a notch. So it was amazing, and it was a kind of a cool parallel to Vader because he was vicious, and you see that bit of him that's like, yeah, it's droids, but like still it was violent and aggressive and just vicious what he was doing, so that you just realize how powerful and how much he's got to be in control. Clearly he has to be in control of the dark side because he's got that in him. So I love the scene, and it definitely was reminiscent of the Vader scene, which is one of my favorite Star Wars scenes of all time. But now this is right up there.
IG and I talked about this the other night on the phone. I really don't think that we ever got a clear look or a good look at Luke's full skill set or Darth Vader's full skill set. We saw them duel, but it wasn't as explosive or as violent or crazy a conflict as we got between Anakin and Kenobi in the prequels. If you hold those two duels together, they're night and day. So to see these characters that we've been told since we were little kids are the most powerful people in the universe finally bring that power to bear, it's amazing. It's everything that I thought it should be. Like when they did that with Vader, I was supremely impressed. Now, when they turned around and they did that with Luke, I'm like, all right, now we finally, Luke is a Jedi master. He's not a kid holding a saber and a black cloak pretending to be, the next big thing. He is the most powerful Jedi in the universe. Kim, as we say goodbye to the child, the world's having the feels, and Grogu and Djarin, they have a moment. He removes the helmet. To you, did the story come full circle? You know what? It did. And I was actually messaging back and forth with a friend of mine who was watching it at the same time we were, kind of like a viewing party. And there was so much about that moment that just kind of brought all the feels together, right? Like you're seeing Luke again, young Luke. They did a good job with how they worked all of the digital animation and whatnot together to really kind of make it feel there. And he just so calmly says, like, I can see that he has a strong connection to you. And then you see those big old doe eyes, it was just, the whole moment was really captivating. You don't really see Pedro Pascal remove his mask, his helmet, and all of a sudden it's just like this, it almost had like a sense of finality to it, but almost not. Like, this isn't it. Like, there's going to be more to this, but it's the beginning of whatever the next chapter is. And it was such a really awesome moment in the show. And I'm really happy with the way that they kind of played it out. Ryan, I want you to answer that question, but I also have a follow-up for you. Did they rob from the moment by him taking the helmet off last episode?
I'm mixed on that because I think the moment from last episode meant a lot. It really did have value. And you know what? I'm going to say no, because in the moment, it still meant a lot. He still, last episode, he took it off in front of people that were not Grogu because that was what he needed to do to get to Grogu. And in this moment, he took it off again. And in the moment, I didn't think about that. I wasn't thinking, oh, crap, they kind of messed this up by doing it last week. I was in the moment. It gave me the feels. And the fact that he smiled and that he touched his face, I think it worked. So it doesn't bother me so much. But, to answer the earlier question, this had the same feeling I had with watching Watchmen last year, where I felt like Watchmen was one of the single best seasons of television ever. I mean, as good as anything we have ever seen. It was very closed-ended. It circled. Came full circle. And as much as I loved that show, I didn't want to see anything more because I was afraid of, you can't top that. This episode gave me a lot of the same feeling that it kind of dotted all the I's, crossed all the T's. He completed his mission, and I don't know, we're going to get more. And I love the show, and I love Grogu, Baby Yoda, and I love, Din Djarin, and I love his whole team, but I don't know that they can top what they've done. It's like that it's a little scary because every episode this season was like, wow, I can't believe they got Ahsoka. How do they top that? Oh crap, Boba Fett's back. How do they top that? Oh, Bill Burr's being amazing. How do we top that? And then they do this. And so it's a little scary to me because I don't know how they top any of this. And I don't know that it will get any better. So and the story was so, it ended so perfectly. It, kind of, again, completed everything. I don't know that we need more, even though we're going to get more.
We saw it a lot in Rogue One. They did it with Grand Moff Tarkin. They did it with Leia, and the CGI is close. It's really close. It's so close that it almost looks like a video game, but it doesn't quite look real to life. Now, Luke showing up was epic, but was the visuals of his face convincing enough to you, or do you think they should have cast a lookalike Mark Hamill?
Well, I think it was convincing enough. It looked okay. I think where they missed the mark is there's time passed between the second Death Star blowing up and their little party on Endor and where we are now. There's obviously a gap. But he looks exactly like he did right then. So they didn't add any aging features or change his hair or do anything from then till now. And the problem with all of that is it just took me a little bit too far. Why does he look exactly like he looks too clean? Like they made some effort to make Grand Moff Tarkin look a little different than he did when he was on the Death Star. Not much, because there wasn't much time to pass between those two things, but a little different. It's great to have these things where they can make somebody look just like they did in some of the stuff, just like they did with Leia, like in Rogue One, just like they did with Tarkin. But sometimes I think, if you get somebody who looks kind of like the part, even if they overdub the voice with the other actor, I think that's fine. But there are plenty of people that could probably look and sound like some of the things. They've replaced people in other things before, and that would be fine, especially since Mark Hamill is not young anymore.
I kind of feel like it wouldn't have done any justice to the character, right? You're talking about a monumental 50-year, 5-decade span, colossal behemoth, universally known character. And I feel like if they would have tried to substitute him with somebody else or like a potential lookalike or something, I feel like it would have cheapened it. And it would have given him, not as much credit as he's deserved. So trying to make it, even though it was CGI, but making him appear, as him and not somebody else, not, like a Kmart version brand of him, I felt like was probably something that did a little bit more justice than to get a lookalike.
Yeah, people would have had a problem with it. I know that Favreau and Filoni said that showing Luke in that light was a last minute decision. This isn't the last we're going to see of Luke or Grogu. They're going to do more with them, but they probably will cast somebody for that part when it's longer and more dialogue. And so we're going to get a little bit of both, and I guess we'll kind of get to figure it out. Ryan, at the end of it, we get a great cutscene as Fett is getting a little bit of retribution back at Jabba's palace as he takes out a portly Bib Fortuna and gets to sit on the Hutt throne. Do you think this will impact season 3? Your closing thoughts on the episode and your rating?
So great little scene. I'm all in for the adventures of Boba Fett and Fennec. Favreau was on something today and basically said that it will affect. So the book of Fett is a separate show. It's a spinoff of The Mandalorian, but a separate show. But production on The Mandalorian won't start until the Boba Fett show is finished, which means we're probably not going to get so where we thought season 3 would start in Christmas, season 3 likely won't start until I would think, or won't air until 2022, or maybe spring of 2022 then, because then we're looking at whenever the Boba Fett ends, and who knows how long they want to wait. So it's gonna be a long wait for the next season, which I'm fine with. As long as Favreau and Filoni are on board and they're writing, take their time, come up with a great story. I like that it's open-ended. I like that they've effectively kind of restarted things. So if they're going to go to season 3, as much as I love the Lone Wolf and the Cub vibe and I love the cute baby Yoda, like that would get old at some point. And so to kind of make this a new show where he's doing on his adventures and he does find Grogu, but in a new light, a trained Grogu who's maybe a Jedi, that makes the dynamic interesting. And I'm looking forward to that. As far as this episode, there's a few things to nitpick at, like, my biggest nitpick was why didn't he go get Ahsoka or, initially, the stuff with the Darksaber, the CGI wasn't great, but I didn't care that much, that it wasn't great because just the aura of it being Luke Skywalker and it being Mark Hamill, that did it for me. So it wasn't as bothered. So yes, there are things to nitpick. This episode was predictable. Like we pretty much knew they were going to get to the ship. They were going to fight their way through. They're probably going to face some resistance from, dark troopers. We knew that there would be a Beskar versus Darksaber battle. We knew that, likely a Jedi. And I was thinking, the whole time, likely Luke Skywalker was going to come and save the day. Nonetheless, it was done so well that I don't care that it was predictable. I mean, everything was done almost perfectly. From the assault, we have our difference of opinion, but the kind of female assault worked really well and was not Avengers-esque, to me. Even the battle with the Beskar versus Darksaber battle was a nice little battle. Giancarlo Esposito he's the best villain, but he was great in what he was given, and really, he was more than just your kind of standard villain. I mean, and he has always been, but he was just really great in his role, even when he was captured. He had this confidence and thinking that he was still going to win until, the X-Wing came. The episode had its little twists and turns, and it was, you had that moment where the fight between Mando and the one Dark Trooper made us realize how difficult they would be. And when there was an entire garrison of the Dark Troopers, they really had that feeling of impending doom. And it really did feel like they might not make it out of there alive, or somebody was going to die. And so when there was that moment with the X-Wing, like that did it for me. I marked out when as soon as the X-Wing came, I kind of yelled to my wife, "It's Luke Skywalker." And again, that was done great. The music in this show has been phenomenal, among the best of any series. But the music when the X-Wing does show up through the end, that made the show. It was so good. It had this kind of, it was ominous and almost dark, all the way leading up to the point where Mando takes his helmet off and Grogu touches his face, and there's music there that has been that it goes back to earlier in the season. I mean, just everything about the music was so well done and adds to the show so much. And yeah, I mean that, between, marking out at seeing the green lightsaber and then seeing Luke Skywalker's face and that moment with him and Grogu and the pain that he in his voice of having to give him up, it just works so well that even if there are some things to nitpick, I mean, I'm giving this episode a 10. This hit me right in the feels. It was one of the best Star Wars moments I can think of, in a really long time. And, I loved it. I think it was great. And if this was a series finale, it would be a perfect finale. We don't need any more. We're going to get more, and I'm cool with that too. But yeah, I give it a 10. It was just awesome. And I've watched it a bunch of times, and I'm just going to keep watching it. You
brought up a lot of really good points. I felt like this entire episode just kind of tied, like you said, everything together, right? All the little spinoffs, the side stories and all of that. And it kind of just brought it all to a whole. I was absolutely enamored by it. I wasn't expecting, to be honest with you, I was blindsided by the fact that it was, Luke Skywalker that was going to come to the rescue. I had a potential hunch, and of course, when I saw the X-Wing, that's one thing. But I mean, with as much as they've kind of built Bill Burr up over the last couple episodes, I was like, well, hell, it could be him for all we know that's going to swoop in and save the day. What a cataclysmic, character arc for him that would be, so I mean, it's not too incredibly far-fetched. I really enjoyed how Cara Dune and Mandalorian's chemistry is, they just really work well together. Even though there's not a whole lot of dialogue that ends up being shared back and forth between the two of them, it's done through body language, it's done through the looks, it's done through, the way that they interact with each other in the scenes. I just absolutely adored it. And to be honest with you, I was really sad that it kind of ended, because we do have to wait another 12 months for something new to come out of this. I've kind of gotten spoiled with that. For me, it's a 10. I can't wait for the next chapter in this series to come out. I'm totally okay with them exploiting it and trying to drain every little bit of juice that they can get out of this. Disney did pay a ton of money for the rights to the series, and I like where they're going with it. I was nervous about it in the beginning, before season 1 came out, but now that we're, here we are at the end of season 2, I'm here for it, and I can't wait to show it for season 3.
So for a show to spawn not 1 but 2 spinoffs, like what's the last thing to do that? Like Happy Days or something, when you got Joni Loves Chachi and Laverne and Shirley.
Don't forget Mork and Mindy.
So we're getting all these extra things. We get the Book of Boba Fett. We're getting Ahsoka. All these things coming just because The Mandalorian did well speaks volumes to what Jon Favreau could do. The thing I would recommend most to Disney in this whole thing is please promote Kathleen Kennedy out of where she is and let Jon Favreau run the show here, because he obviously has a good clue of what to do with all the properties. Now, I think there's still some Kathleen Kennedy influence, which is why we get so many strong female things in there, because she's a big proponent of the Force is female, which is fine. I don't have any problem with there being strong female characters, but you need to do them right. You can see the difference here between the sequel trilogy and The Mandalorian, where they just kind of set Rey up more like a Mary Sue. She's not a complete Mary Sue, but she is able to do things she has no business being able to do. Where everybody here, they're the strong female have earned where they're at. So I like that Jon Favreau, and he's able to do it with characters in very small amounts of time, make them badass and set up a backstory for them very quickly. This season was great. This episode in particular was probably the top one of the entire season. I loved it completely. And even with all the little nitpicks that we've had throughout it, it doesn't take away from the show as a whole. A lot of great things going on, a lot of awesome things to see. I wish we had more Boba Fett in the episode, but that's because I love Boba Fett. So that being said, I give it a 10. I really, really loved everything that happened in this episode, especially the post-credits scene where we get the Book of Boba Fett. And I was afraid, and it's already been cleared up by Disney, that the Book of Boba Fett is a separate spin-off from The Mandalorian. So I waited for a couple of days to see something, and I just finally saw something official from Disney today saying that it's its own thing.
I never would have imagined we would have got a Boba Fett show. Once the Solo movie landed on its face, it looked like maybe Boba Fett wasn't going to happen for us. Boba Fett and Cinik being the focus of a show has great potential. I mean, I've heard rumors that they were shooting season 3 and 4 of The Mandalorian back to back. It sounds like more we're going to get season 1 of the Book of Boba Fett and season 3 of Mandalorian back to back, which makes me happy because we'll get the reunion with Cara and Greef and Djarin. It shouldn't be too much further off than a year. This episode absolutely made me feel like a kid again. I love all these properties coming together. Even with the enhanced CGI, we finally get to see Luke, and he was amazing. That green saber lit, and I was mesmerized. He wasn't pretending to be a Jedi Knight. He was a badass Jedi Master in that, which just was great for me. There was some huge points throughout the season where I don't think Star Wars has ever been done better. The story did feel rushed, and this episode could have been 20 minutes longer, probably. Other than that, I loved it. It was heartbreaking, the goodbye between the Mandalorian and Grogu. We needed it. It was hard to see, but we needed it. We had to push the story forward somehow. Like Ryan said, at some point, this probably would get stale after a while. Listen, I'm a fan of the kick-ass women's movement, so that didn't take me out of it. I mark out seeing these ladies do their thing. It's good for Disney to do. I hope they keep doing it. For anyone that has ever said goodbye to anybody they truly love, they knew exactly what Djarin was going through. In my life, I've had to do it a few times, and frankly, you've got to put away selfish desires and let people go. Let them leave your life and sometimes grow, sometimes heal, sometimes just move on to bigger and better things. There's no bigger sign of respect that you can give anything that you love than being able to say goodbye to it. The Mandalorian has become my favorite Star Wars property of all time, and The Rescue was straight up a 10 for me.
And that's it. You made it to the end of another episode of the Cinik Radio podcast. I'm Igrihe, here with Cinik, who you can find at CINIKRADIO.com. Also, we had Ryan, who you can find at thejimwits.com, and Kim, who you can find at KMCArtworks.com. Great artists. Go check out some really cool stuff. We'll be back next week with some new stuff for you, probably some news as well. Send your crazy news stories, any comments, questions, and concerns to us at CINIKRADIO@gmail.com. Find us on the internet at CINIKRADIO.com. Look for us on Facebook at Facebook.com/CINIKRADIO. Find us on Twitter at CINIKRADIO. And find us on Instagram at CINIKRADIO. You can also head over to tpublic.com, search for Cinik, CINIK, and get your own Cinik Radio podcast gear. T-shirts, mugs, cups, stickers, all the cool Cinik Radio podcast stuff you could possibly want. It'd help the show, and we would greatly appreciate it. Thanks again for all the love and support. Keep listening, sharing it with your friends, like, listen, and subscribe. And until next time, don't get captured.
Follow the podcast on Twitter, Facebook, and at CINIKRADIO.com. Available for download on iTunes.